I know. Okay. Well, everyone, we addressed the video problem last time. I will make sure that does not happen again.
Never show them your mistakes, ever.
No. Rick is he's all warmed up. He just gave a lecture at the library here, so it is amazing. If you were here, I hope you enjoyed it. And will there be a link?
Yes, I'll probably not do a video of it, but I'll be in this area again several times. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
He puts me to shame. He's going hard and strong. So I took you guys' questions, and we're gonna just knock them out right now because there's no time to waste. So with the first question, Rick, the recent discovery of the Carruthers. Give me some of your thoughts on the Carruthers that was just fought.
12 ships vanished in one weekend, right? So when we talk about big storms, nothing is bigger than the storm that's called the King of Storms. So 12 ships, all hands lost, and 3 are still missing. So the Plymouth, which I've done extensive research and put in my book, Bottle Goodbyes, the Carruthers was the biggest, 550 feet long, and for decades people have searched for it, and it's been elusive. And finally the Leafield, which is up on Lake Superior, and Ken Merriman, and they were very close. So I'll bet you that one will be found too. But to have Trotter do it, this is an amazing hat trick. 3 of the 1913 ships that he's found. So he's found the McGeehan, he's found the Hydrus, and he's found the Carruthers, and the Carruthers was the granddaddy. The bummer is they're all upside down. Well, no, Hydrus is upright, but the McGeehan and the Carruthers are upside down, so they're still hiding their secrets from 1913. So that's kind of a bummer. The depth is reasonable.
190.
Yeah, but they had some neat artifacts that were outside. I'm bummed that they were touched. We try not to disturb those things. They should be recorded but not touched. But beyond that, it's an amazing find by an amazing team that includes so many of my friends that I've gone to dive shows with. So I'm thrilled for them. I'm thrilled for the stories. I'm thrilled for the family members that have generations that wondered what happened to Cameron and all of the crew.
As they say, they're still great.
Oh, you bet. And they've read the books, and they might have seen my documentary. I did the first documentary on the 1913 storm with 2 eyewitnesses that survived it. So this has always been a passion of mine. And I don't have the budget or really even the knowledge or the ability to go find these wrecks. I have to do it vicariously through them and through the museum that I'm so lucky to be affiliated with.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that.
No worries.
Thank you for that on the Carruthers. Yeah, that stinks. Whatever people are doing, down there, like observe and whatnot. But hopefully, like you were saying in a lecture, like it's preserved, and like for people to say bring stuff up that could ruin it.
Oh, absolutely. And we now have high definition video that is so great. And if we need to reproduce something, we've got printers that can do it now, in plastics and stuff, and do realistic things. Right. Some things, if they're going to crumble, yes, we should look at it. But the thought was in the 60s and 70s and 80s, I'll grab it and give it to a museum. And so many of the times it was destroyed. So, Lady Elgin being a perfect example of guns that came up that are falling apart now because of all the controversy and how the court case went to Harry Zeik, and all these things are now in limbo. And who loses out? We do. And the divers that might eventually go and dive that site, I always try to protect it for my grandkids and my great-grandkids that might be able to see these sites. Nothing is sadder than going to a wreck and they say, oh, you should have seen this back in the 60s.
Right.
Let's leave the stuff that we can now with this new ethic and not take a trophy home. And I'm not saying anybody did, but there's a long record of many people who did.
That's really unfortunate. Speaking of that, what do you think? So the Anderson is so it's back in Ohio right now.
Yep.
What's going to happen to the Anderson?
Nobody knows. I mean, we know that a good friend of mine who's the storm warrior who gave us updates real time on board was right in the pilot house. He got transferred. So immediately we all knew it wasn't going to sail this year. I don't think it's going to sail, but I don't think anybody during the 50th anniversary of the Fitzgerald wanted to announce that the Anderson would never sail again. I think that that's been kept low on purpose, but I cannot imagine an economy that's going to come back, and maybe it will. I mean, we've seen some big moves on tariffs and stuff that could change that, steel industry. Maybe there'll be a demand, but my feeling is sadly that she won't sail again. And my feeling is too that there's not a budget for another museum ship.
Because that's what you and I had previously talked about. Is you got the Valley Camp, you got the
Boyer in Duluth, you've got the Sundew.
I had previously talked with Rick about what they're going to do with it, but like you've got all these. You got the Valley Camp, you got the Schoonmaker in Ohio, you got the what was the other one?
The Irwin. I mean, let's see. We've got in Duluth. We've got the Irwin that is beautiful. It's a great representation of that era. And Schoonmaker survived the 13 storm. She wasn't on the open lake,
right,
but it's a totally different ship than the Mather that's in Cleveland. So we've got every genre of these massive freighters, but nobody goes to see them enough. I mean, I think that there's incredible programming, especially coming out of Toledo, where the National Museum has integrated not only the Fitzgerald with their tours, but so many of the other topics. And to see a vessel that was really ornamentative. I mean, you've got fireplaces on board and stuff that Fitzgerald did not have, and modern freighters don't have. So we've got good representations of that. It was our Coast Guard cutters that the Bramble is being scrapped in Louisiana now. It was a museum that nobody went to see. The Sundew that saved the crew of the Carl D. Bradley was a museum that nobody went to go see. There's a lot of tugboats that have kind of gone away, but our light ship that's in Port Huron, which
the
Meteor. The Meteor, which needs
last whaleback
and needs incredible help right now, support from people. And if we can take care of those things, that I would argue have more significance than the Anderson. If we take care of that by even just visiting it, then we'll get a case for that. But don't just say because it was behind the Fitzgerald it deserves to have $1 million of renovation.
Right.
Maybe the pilot house, maybe some pieces off of it, and I'll bet you there's negotiations right now.
That's more feasible
than
the whole ship itself.
Oh, I'd love to see the pilot house up at Whitefish, yeah.
If they could just keep the pilot house and then to be able to walk, that would be significant. I think that could be more doable.
But we do have the William Clay Ford that was in the same storm at Dawson. And again, I would argue it's on limited hours and very few people go to see it. Please, please, please go see it. Show us that support. Captain Erickson's rough footprint mark is still on the radar set. This is history that's there, and great docents that'll tell you about it there too, which is true of all the museum ships. Everyone that I went on had an old crew that would be there and tell you about it. That's what you need to really interpret it, not just a rusting old piece of ship that's there. You need people there to tell you the stories, and we could all do a better job of that as well.
And you've got logs and logs of interview. You got the interviews. You've got the one-on-one interactions, the personal testimony from people. You've got all this stuff, and that's.
You'd be surprised at how many museums don't want to use it. I mean, they do ask for the Fitzgerald stuff, but so much of the other stuff that I have, there's not a big interest in it. And I think it comes down to funding. And again, more people go to visit it, more people ask about these things, you'll see more things go towards it. But that's where the Fitzgerald that we talked about tonight gets all the love because of Gordon's song. And part of that's upsetting, but I also know in my heart, if Gordon didn't write that song, I wouldn't be talking about shipwrecks. So it's a love-hate, and I say hate very playfully. I think
it's a fierce passion.
Yes.
Because we love the Fitzgerald, we love it so very much. Here's a whole thousands of others that deserve it.
You bet. And books and all the other stories, and hopefully other historians like yourself, you've done so many incredible videos on ships that didn't get songs written about them. I think that that's part of it too. Get that out to the mass crowds in little snippets so that they can just take it rather than buying a whole book. They can learn about the story through your book or through your videos. That's a very cool way to reach out.
That's why I named the channel Songs of the Great Lakes, because these ships have their own songs similar to the Lightfoot one, but not, because, and then many of these people will go unnamed, faceless for forever.
Yep.
All we have is spotty records, or sometimes, these short videos that I can produce. And if that's all I can get out for these people, be like, hey, such and such sank on this day way back in 1890, whatever. They still were alive. They were still real people. They went through a horrible thing. They should not be forgotten. So.
No, and people have to know too about the time that you put into that. That is hours and hours and hours of research before you even start editing, and then putting it all together. There's not a tip jar, and there's not a donate to me right here anywhere. And even if you did, quite honestly, nobody would give, because people love free content. but they don't want to pay for anything. And that's been a real bane, that I've had to divide my time up to say I cannot be the full-time video guy or the author guy for free. I've got to make it, balance that with my life like you have with your family and stuff. And that's tough. Yeah. So it's important to have a good mix of things you can sell and things you can give away. But people online would love to have more free. And sadly, I can't bring that to the power company and say, look, I made a video on the Fitzgerald.
Just mortgage the house again, like it's just keep mortgaging the house. All right, we're gonna keep knocking these out. So this question comes from, all these are different subscribers, so I will read it to you. So when Captain McSorley radios that he has sustained topside damage, he reports that he has a fence rail down and he has vent caps missing or damaged. How did he know that? The way he describes the problem, it sounds like this, and this is from the subscriber, that he can't see the cap in question. Does damaged mean that the cap is still there but unable to function, or is this...
We know it's multiple because he said vents that were missing, and so we know that, we don't know if it's just the top or the whole thing was ripped off. We see in the Coast Guard video and some of the footage that we've recorded that it's been tipped over. One of the vents was tipped over, so he might have seen a vent that was tipped over and was leaking, and he called that, missing or whatever. But he probably saw where there should have been a vent, and with binoculars you can see the end of the ship. So even through the snow, he saw that damage. Now, the rail is another question. He said, I have a rail down. He didn't say fence rail, and there's argument between the first mate on the Anderson and Cooper as to whether it was missing or down. So we don't know for sure, but at least two vents were. The rail could have been, and this is a guess. What about the rails on deck that the hatch crane was on? What if he said, I have a rail gone, and he was talking about that? But it's most likely a fence rail, the fencing that ran the length of the ship so the guys wouldn't get washed overboard. But rail down could mean a couple different things, and unfortunately we'll never know the answer.
There has been a lot of discussion on the load limit changes over the life of the ship, and this is still about the Fitzgerald. Did the load changes mean legal capacity in the winter was more than originally designed to carry on the summer? And after the engine change from coal to oil and the addition of the bow thruster, would those have a major influence?
Yeah, the thought is that if you carry less cargo in the wintertime, those big waves that are notorious in the fall can't get up on deck if the ship is riding higher in the water. So less cargo means she rides farther, and that, the distance between the waves is off. Now, they argued, Ogilvy Norton argued to the Coast Guard, these are all weather tight. We've never seen any leaks. We should be allowed to carry more cargo. And the Coast Guard agreed, thinking that all the hatches were being dogged down and thinking that they were weather tight, but they weren't. They were leaking, and they figured this out after they did a ride share afterwards. They would do surprise inspections on ships after Fitz went down, and 80% of the ships were non-compliant. They weren't dogging them all down. They could see gaps where they could see sunlight through. So we know water was coming in through those, probably being absorbed by the taconite to where they didn't see it when it came out, but that weight is still there. They wanted the load line in the winter to carry more cargo. The Coast Guard, not knowing the Fitz was going to sink, said, that sounds great, but you got to lift those vents a little higher, because if water gets on board, we don't want it going down the vents. They found out that it'd be a trip hazard on deck, and I've only seen two that were actually raised up in pictures. So I don't know how many were modified, and the Coast Guard doesn't put that in the thing either. So Did it happen? I don't know. Was it a problem that they raised them and those were the ones missing? Maybe. I mean, now you've got something that's higher, and all these logs and stuff that might have been in the water that they reported at the Sioux, was that damaging the vents and causing problems on the deck? Possibly, but that was all combined. Hatches, vents missing, and then that giant wave that came up. That was the difference between the Anderson sinking and the Fitzgerald sinking, and structural problems with the Fitzgerald, and the fact that the Anderson wasn't listed in that manual I showed you from the Weather Bureau as to a ship that always took on storms, but McSorley was. You know, 5 different storms in
You said
75
the Bradley,
alone.
the Morel, if they had just anchored instead of...
They'd still be here. Well, they'd be scrapped by now, but they would have survived this. You know, they would have definitely. But you know, their history was they were the biggest. The Bradley was the biggest when it was launched. The Morel was one of the biggest with the Townsend. It turns out both of those were damaged beyond control, and the Townsend ended up sinking in the Atlantic on the way to get scrapped. So all of them had captains that pushed beyond their limits and sadly paid the price for it.
Okay, next question. This is for both of us. So, if we had a time machine and could travel back to either a Great Lakes port in its heyday and see the ships coming and going, which one? Or if you could travel back to walk the decks of a particular ship in its prime and interact with the crew before it was lost, which one and why? So I'll let you go first on that, Rick.
2 things. I have to play favorites. Marquette has such an incredible history with the first big ore dock that came in. It would be amazing to see that with sailing vessels and everything coming in. But that 1 hour that's missing on the Fitzgerald at Burlington Northern, why was it delayed an hour being loaded? Nobody talks about it, but they were delayed. I wouldn't mind taking that time machine to ask McCarthy what's going on. Was this part of the deal? Did they have a problem with their pumps getting the water off, and maybe that was a problem later on? That would be another time machine thing. But I'd also love to sit on the deck of the Griffin, in 1679 and see where Luke's going to go, and did he make the Straits? So many people believe that it sank between Washington Island or even Summer Island, some people think, and Seshwa Point. Is it in there somewhere? Did it make it further? There's a lot of questions that a time machine would help. You?
It would be, if it wasn't Whitefish Point and the Fitzgerald story that got this channel going for me, it would be the Kamloops. I wear the shirt all the time. I would want to meet Alice. I would want to meet, I have a family member who's Arthur Hauman, one of them. I would love to know, did they all make it on the lifeboats to the island? Did they swim to the island? Was it so caked over with ice that it eventually capsized? I would want to meet people from that, because you look at pictures from the 20s and such a cool, the way they dress, the way they talk. I would love to meet the people of the Kamloops, and then knowing how tragic that story is, and people in the lecture earlier, they always want to ask about the bodies and stuff, and you talk about, I know people have done tech dives online, and they've said, oh yeah, there's 13 people floating around here, there, and everywhere, or something like.
And they're so disrespectful.
Right, and it's. I would love to meet the real, because think about Alice. She's what, 21, 22, maybe 23, I think, and she's just doing a normal job, and
just to make money.
Same for Nettie Grafton, the head steward. Like, I would love to have met these people and then seen.
But then do you tell them, don't get on?
Yeah, that's the thing. Or at least if we could have been a fly on the wall just to watch, that's how it played out. That's what it could have, and like with the Fitzgerald or the Kamloops, or take any other ship, it could be a total left field. So, this is a factor we didn't even think could have actually,
you bet,
could have contributed to it. It could be a total,
Agreed. But a great question.
Okay. Rick, where do you believe the Marquette and Bessemer number 2 will be found in Lake Erie?
Oh gosh, if I knew that, we'd have it.
Do you have any hunches?
There's that 200-foot hole. Remember, the average depth of Lake Erie is 65 feet. We would find pretty much every schooner because the mast would be sticking up after it sank.
Right.
But the bottom is like cold cream. All of that sediment is coming down, and if you push your hand down, you realize that it's just a little weaker than clay, and everything is settling down.
You think she sunk pretty far?
Yeah, but not beyond her entire depth. There's been wrecks, and my friends have found them that are below the surface, and I believe it could happen. But the car ferry, I just can't believe that.
You'd think something that big would have been found by now, and with how small.
Well, the Canadian government has done a lot of gas exploration in that area too. So why didn't it show up there? But these are elusive, and because they really didn't have a last seen point, and so much wreckage was found, the lifeboats and stuff, there's a lot of clues, but it's one of those ones I never spent a lot of time on. My job has been to try to find the people who survived and do those stories, because those are the ones that I could do as a television producer. The other ones I've kind of just let other people handle, and hopefully, vicariously pick up facts from it, but I've never done a deep dive.
Piece together your own kind of. I think that's what we all do. We kind of piece together our own series of events like this could have played out. I could see it that way play out.
I think it'll be found though. Yeah.
Okay, let me see. Oh, we're good. We're only 14 minutes. Okay. Rick, are there ancient stone monuments in one or any of the Great Lakes? And if so, how did they get there?
Traverse City has been famous for a guy who found some circles and thought, that this was some kind of a Stonehenge. And it's morphed into people using real rocks that are much taller than the real ones down there. My friend Dusty Cliffman and his buddy went down there and actually filmed them. They said there was a scratch mastodon on there, and they totally debunked the whole thing. We have rows of rocks on the bottom that some people, very scholarly people at University of Michigan, believe are hunting rows, that they would push the ancient animals into down these rows and then they could hunt them. But they've never found stone points. They've never found anything.
There's no secret Stonehenge in Lake Michigan.
None there, but everybody clicks on it, and it becomes this huge thing that I think is overblown. But if it brings interest to our shipwrecks and interest to our maritime history, that's great. But please don't be fooled into these fake pictures that are down there.
Mixing up fact and fiction,
You bet.
Especially with AI. I'm sure maybe you could create something with AI that's totally
you
not.
could. I don't know why you would, with so many real stories on the bottom of the Great Lakes.
For the clicks,
But
even though it's fiction.
there's stories that people would never believe, but instead we go to gold and ghosts on the Great Lakes, and it's ridiculous. You don't need that. There's rescues, there's soul survivors, there's everything you could think of, fires, explosions, all real stuff that you could spend time on. Don't waste your time on monoliths and other things that are a stretch.
Okay, next question, Rick. What are the oldest shipwrecks, in your opinion, that we have yet to discover? Or maybe I'll enhance their question. Maybe ones that you're looking forward to.
Oh boy, the eldest ones, and again, we have to look at LaSalle. Here's a businessman that came in and was a former priest, and in 1679 decided to build two vessels, the Frontenac, which we don't know for sure if that was the official name of it, and then he builds Griffin, which he has to build on the other side of Niagara Falls because he obviously can't sail up Niagara Falls. So he gets the Frontenac. His pilot, Luke, runs it aground and ruins it. So that's the first shipwreck on the Great Lakes that we consider the first commercial traffic. They take the pieces off of there and they walk them around Niagara Falls to near where Buffalo is now. And Cayuga Creek is where most people agree that they built the Griffin. And then the local Seneca Indians want to destroy it because they see it as competition. The king has told them, you can't do the beaver trade here, but he's already hedged his bet. He's way in debt. And so the Griffin sails to go into Green Bay area to pick up furs that he was illegal to have, but he wanted to pay back the people, including the governor of New France, that Frontenac, that he owed money to. So this is a whole thing that becomes a shipwreck up in the upper Great Lakes too. So LaSalle loses two ships within a year, and the Griffin, we don't know where it's at. Although 30 people have said they found it since 1933, and we've seen countless television specials recently of a guy who says he found a log that was part of it, and people keep giving him airtime when he's found nothing but a net stake.
This hasn't been cross-confirmed or
every archaeologist believes it's not the ship, and the French experts came over and they said, well, we're not saying it's not, but they never came back. So let's just leave it at that.
We want to be sure. We want to be sure. You don't,
Right, and LaSalle lost several ships coming back. He discovered the mouth of the Mississippi, so where Father Marquette and Joliet did not make it to the end of the Mississippi, they were worried the Spanish were going to kill them. They turned around in Arkansas. LaSalle sailed all the way down, gets to the Delta, which became New Orleans. He calls the whole area after King Louis XIV, calls it Louisiana. And then King Louis says, go back with a bunch of ships and 300 men and let's colonize this to keep the Spanish away. Yeah. But he can't find it. He makes a wrong turn and ends up in Texas. And it all ends up, I think it should be a Hollywood movie because it's so many moving parts. They end up killing LaSalle, and even his cousin and his brother lie about him being dead because they want to get passage back to France. So there's so much story in there that to me is not only the first but the most incredible story that I think has so many layers of Tonti, the metal-handed henchman of LaSalle, all the way through LaSalle himself, who was called Ruthless, and set up all these forts and all of the exploration of the French. The Mississippi is all another component. I think that would be an amazing one. So those are considered the first shipwrecks. Frontenac, Le Griffon, and again, neither one of them have been discovered yet.
Speaking of the Frontenac,
several different Frontenacs.
Rick had told us in his lecture earlier, so there wasn't just the Edmund Fitzgerald that we all know. There was a previous Fitzgerald ship as well, which ended up being the relation.
It was his uncle.
His uncle.
Yeah.
So
and 6 people died in November storm for that too. Disappeared, which is tragic.
Yeah. Was the Frontenac involved in the search for the Fitzgerald?
There was a big list of ships that were at or near Whitefish Point, and we typically remember the Nanfree, the Benfree, and the Aberforths that are the saltwater vessels that decide to keep on going. They've got the winds at their bow. They're only making 1 mile an hour, but they felt safe enough to go into the storm. Many of those saltwater pilots said, "It's just a great lake. It's a pond. It won't bother us," and they got a real respect for it. We know that the William Clay Ford was there. We know that Hilda Marjane tried to go back out but turned around because of the storm. We know the Rausch was there, but it decided not to go back out. The captain making a good call to keep his crew and ship safe. Frontenac, I believe, was one of those boats that was there. I think the Benjamin Fairless was another one that was there. But they're never really mentioned because they didn't weigh anchor. They don't get the hero status that Anderson gets, or that certainly the William Clay Ford, which has a pilot house, and Erickson was considered a hero for going back in. But there wasn't much they could do. You can't argue against those captains that were smart enough to leave the hook down and not go into the storm. And I salute the heroes that did, but I don't ever blame the captains that stayed back.
He made a good point earlier that I didn't even think of. When the captain is as much as they're not built to go out and rescue, that's the Coast Guard, what you said,
Right.
But they have to think of their crew first. And you played the recordings between McSorley and the Coast Guard saying, "We would like you to go back out, but it's your decision." And those who made the decision not to, they are still heroes in their own right, because they kept those.
You bet.
They kept those people. We don't have 6 or 7 other Fitzgerald boats that went
Right.
down and died. So they are just as much as heroes for making that decision. Probably was not an easy decision. I'm sure
Not
they
at all.
wanted to.
But most of them believe, just like Cooper did, that what am I going to do? I don't have rescue equipment. I don't have a way to stop and do this and pick them up. He said it was an exercise in futility in the interview at Whitefish Point. So for me,
How would he have even, say
yeah.
they were on a life raft and say that they were just close enough to, how do you stop something that big? Yeah.
But they were the only ones, and you go. With the spirit of the lake in the ocean is to do what you can to save them, because you would hope somebody else would do that for you if you were floating in a life raft. It just turned out that the Fitzgerald's crew never made it to the rafts. They never made it off the ship except for one guy, and we found him.
Rick was making a good point earlier. The life vest, you said, was so rotted away. Did he jump from the ship? And another thing I didn't think of. So the suction is a real thing. The suction, could he have been pulled down?
Every survivor I've talked to talked about the suction. So I've seen TV shows that fight against it. But this guy had a cork vest that stayed intact enough that the bricks did not move. So the cork vest, they did have cork type on Fitzgerald and Kapok, the modern, fiber-filled ones from plants. But the cork, why didn't it float? Why didn't it break apart? At that depth, the air bubbles inside of it would be crushed. It couldn't float. So why did he get drugged down that far? Or did he get out halfway down the water column? We'll never know. Or is he from another ship? It's possible. and it would sure let us all off the
You
hook.
told about though the radius, that's a stretch.
You don't float with a life vest on forever and then sink. Most people are found on the beach with a life vest on. You don't just sink, but there's still 1,000 people that have unaccounted on the Great Lakes. But many of the ships like the Adela Shores, no one has found. So, I don't believe there's a Chippewa legend about Lake Superior not giving up her dead, but she didn't on a lot of accounts.
We've covered ship stories, all these other ones where they've tried to jump from ship to ship, like you said, or they fall in between. They're going down. I think it was the Comet where the guy said, "Oh God, I'm dead," as he's getting pulled under. What a dreadful thing, Rick. You're trying to fight for Rick was talking about when almost a near miss with your camera. We almost crumbled, and you shot back up when you were diving.
Thank heavens I didn't go that deep, but I'll tell you, I don't dive these because they're graveyards. That's not an interest to me. I covered so many people hurt and killed, families burned up, kids being eaten by pit bulls in the news. I covered those and had to go to funerals and was embarrassed to do it because I knew how the families felt. It sucks. It's the worst, and it never goes away. I've lost loved ones too. The graveyard part of it has no interest to me. The rescues, the people who go out there and risk their lives, and especially the people who make it through, those are the stories I'm more interested in. Fitzgerald just became something that I was equipped to be a videographer. I was a diver. I could do all the underwater, and the only underwater guy that I've seen on any of the expeditions had jumped into the lake to film the sub. So I had the skills to do it and did it, but Fitzgerald would never be in my top 10 stories. Everybody died. It's just a sad story. But the heroes that went out in the airplanes and the helicopters and the boats, the Cooper and all these other people, there are incredible stories that go well beyond the 29 bell tolls that we do every November.
Like many of the questions tonight were like, well, who's going to ring the bell for this? And who's going to ring the bell for that person in this ship? And it's like, that's...
And how long will that go on? I mean, after a while, we won't have direct descendants. It just happens. And should it just be, let's remember everybody who died in November, or everybody who died on the Great Lakes, or the lifesavers that risked their lives and died off the thumb. The entire crew, except for Captain Kia, died, or Ben Cameron, who saved 600 lives. They should get a bell toll, more so than somebody that, sadly just perished on a shipwreck.